Hey, Jordan Sheridan, live on Periscope and YouTube. It is Monday, May 14th, and it is kind of a just insane and historic day, I think, for all the wrong reasons. So let me make sure everything is working here before I continue. Here we go. All right. So it is a extremely busy day. Are we working here on YouTube? I cannot tell. Here we go.
Extremely.
It is chaotic, obviously, in Gaza, where by my last count, 55 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli Defense Forces. There are other things going on, but that has kind of taken over the news cycle. Unfortunately, as this is going on, and there's nothing else to call it, but a massacre is going on, there is pretty much minuscule media coverage of it. And the very little media coverage we do have of the massacres going on in Gaza right now are very, very skewed and basically not really reporting the truth of what is going on. So I'm going to lead with that. Just going to wait a couple more minutes for a couple more people to join in here. Excuse me if I'm sniffling and if I look a little out of it. I have insane allergies that I've never had before that I now have. So I've been sneezing and I'm very congested, but wanted to report today because it is just disgusting what is going on. We talk about the fascist state that America has become in this country, but America is supporting murder. That's what it is, murder. Right now at mostly unarmed Palestinian people in Gaza right now. So I'm just going to wait just a couple minutes. YouTube has been doing some interesting things, so always have a smaller audience at first, and then a rush of people come in saying they didn't know I was actually live because they didn't get a notification. So I'll give it a little bit. Press the share button to get this out to as many people as possible. Once again, apologies. I have not been crying, but I just have insane allergies. I've been sneezing for weeks, but it's gotten really bad since spring happened. I guess I need to go to an allergist because I think I'm allergic to pollen or something. So I'll start now. The latest update we have, this is from Al Jazeera. Hold on. Strange. One second. I don't know why that's not working. There we go. So the latest update. Gaza protests. This is from Al Jazeera 11 minutes ago. At least 55 Palestinians were killed on Monday in Gaza and more than 2,700 others wounded as the Israeli army fired live ammunition, tear gas, and firebombs at protesters assembled along several points near the fence with Israel. The demonstrations, which coincided with protests against the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, are part of a weeks-long movement calling for the right of return for Palestinian refugees to the areas they were forcibly expelled from in 1948. Since the protest began on March 30th, Israeli forces have killed at least 104 Palestinians in the coastal enclave and wounded about 12,000 people. The protests come ahead of the annual commemoration of the Nakba, or catastrophe, when the State of Israel was established on May 15, 1948, in a violent campaign that led to the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their villages. So, literally, 55, and this might be outdated by the time I'm done today. 55 Palestinians were killed. By my count, we have eight children who were killed on top of the 55 that were murdered. I always like to say, because I always, of course, like to keep it real, I am not there, obviously. I am in New York. So all I could go on is the reporting that I have seen from various accounts, from pro-Palestinian accounts to obviously pro-Israeli accounts. But from the videos I have seen, from the photos I have seen, you had largely unarmed people being shot at, having missiles dropped on them in airstrikes, having live bullets shot at them. There have been people in the press fired at. There were Palestinians throwing rocks at Israeli soldiers. From what I see, there were Palestinians trying to, get through the Israeli wall. But even though obviously throwing rocks is not something, I would cheer, throwing rocks is not going to kill an Israeli soldier. Throwing rocks is not going to kill an Israeli resident. Bullets do kill, and 55 people have lost their lives. 55 people have lost their lives, largely from real bullets, airstrikes, being fired at majority unarmed people. Of course, I do understand. Put aside whether you think Israel has the right to exist or not. Put aside whether you think Israel is occupying the Palestinians. Put that aside for 1 minute. I know for many that's difficult to do. Put that aside for a second. Israel is a declared country, whether we like it or not. If protesters are firing rocks at soldiers, soldiers have a right to defend themselves. However, soldiers do not have a right to shoot them down dead. You don't have the right to kill people who are not trying to kill you. And America and American pro-Israel media, I'm going to get to the New York Times, which is just astounding, are basically reporting it as, oh, well, Hamas, is stirring the pot, and Hamas is getting these Palestinians to protest, and Hamas is responsible for the deaths. Well, Hamas is a terrorist organization, no doubt about it. Hamas does issue propaganda. Hamas does urge people to kill Israelis and to kill Israeli soldiers. That is true. However, Hamas is not responsible for Israeli soldiers shooting Palestinians dead. That is the Israeli soldiers that are responsible. So two things could be true at one time. You could have a propaganda terrorist network that is trying to stoke up hatred. But honestly, I don't think the majority of the Palestinians need Hamas to inspire them to protest the day that the embassy was moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which is basically a large, giant slap in the face to Palestinians. And a lot of you don't know this about me, so I'm going to keep it real. My father is probably the biggest Zionist I've ever met in my life. Loves Israel, thinks Benjamin Netanyahu could do no wrong. My older brother volunteered in the Israeli army. Both my brothers actually went to private Jewish school. I did not. And my older brother, for his love of Judaism and Israel, volunteered to serve in the IDF. And he is, he has moved back to America, but he served for 2.5 years. So I don't even bother talking to my father about Israel. I love my father. I love my father more than most. Other than my mother and my brothers, my father, I love him. However, I don't agree with everything he feels as far as Israel. I don't agree with my older brother as far as everything they feel. Doesn't mean I don't love them, but there are certain things that I just don't expend the energy on to fight with my father about. My father is one of these people who believe God gave Israel the land. I do not. He believes that Palestinians should not be protesting and trying to get up close to the Israeli wall. I think Palestinians have a right to protest. I don't think they have a right to throw rocks at soldiers, but Israeli soldiers do not. And the Israeli military does not have a right to basically open fire on unarmed people. There are non-lethal ways. Trust me, I was at Standing Rock. There are non-lethal ways of responding. I don't think the non-lethal measures should be the first effort or the first tools used. But I do understand if you have rocks being thrown at you, if you have projectiles coming your way, if Israeli soldiers feel Palestinian protesters are trying to breach their wall, they do have a right to defend themselves. That does not give them the right to murder 55 people. This on top of the 16 that were killed a few weeks ago in Gaza. Can you imagine if anything like this happened to an American ally? America would be calling it genocide. America would be calling it genocide. But America is backing Israel no matter what. And this was one of the New York Times headlines today. Tell me if something seems wrong here. Israel kills dozens at Gaza border as U.S. embassy opens in Jerusalem. And by the way, this was a headline they had changed. At first, it was just like dozens of Palestinians killed at Gaza border. Then they changed it to this. So let me get it straight. And a lot of people were saying this on Twitter. Dozens of Palestinian protesters killed in Gaza? How'd they die? Was there a lawnmower accident? The New York Times, dozens of protesters killed in Gaza. They won't even say what's actually happening. Then they change it to Israel kills dozens at Gaza border. Were they unarmed? Yeah, they were. How did they kill them? With airstrikes and live bullets. But you see, the corporate media is deathly afraid of criticizing Israel. I mostly cover domestic politics. I don't cover Israel and the Palestinian situation that much because there's a lot of problems in America that I cover, that I focus on. It is also not a pleasure for me to cover it because I know, just keep it real, I know I'm going to get a call from my father tonight wanting to talk to me for 2.5 hours explaining why I'm wrong because that's how he feels. And at times, I don't want to deal with it. But you got to do what's right. You have to report the truth. And this is the truth of what's happening. The Palestinians, thousands of them, came to protest what they see as a slap in their face, what they see as further occupation, moving the capital of Israel to Jerusalem, which the Palestinians believe Jerusalem would be a capital for their country. And they came out to protest, which they have a right to do. It's nuanced, though. They don't have a right. They don't have a right to be hurling rocks at soldiers, to be, trying to breach a wall fence. They don't have that right. They do have a right to protest. They do have a right to make their voices known. If America always says we support Israel because it is a democratic country in the Middle East who believes in freedom of the press, who believes in freedom of speech. Well, we need to honor that for people who protest Israel, who protest the embassy. I mean, the pictures were startling. You see on Twitter, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, Lindsey Graham, Senator Cruz. They're having breakfast and smiling for the cameras while at that time it wasn't 55, but dozens and dozens of Palestinians are being murdered by Israeli soldiers. That contrast is sickening. It would be one thing if Palestinians were firing shots at Israeli soldiers. It would be another thing if they were hurling rockets. But from everything I could see on Twitter and the reports I've read, The majority of these protesters are unarmed. And again, although I don't condone hurling rocks, and I would not condone if the Native Americans at Standing Rock were hurling rocks or hurling things at police, I believe in non-violent protest. I think that is the only way that political measures can be effective. But throwing rocks and throwing things that will not kill soldiers should not be met. Let me repeat, should not be met with this kind of murder. And that's what it is, murder. Who knows? Who knows by the end of this broadcast, by the end of today, what the death toll will be at. But I could tell you one thing, 2,700 people are wounded today. And it's only going to get worse because these protests are going to happen all week. So why is this happening? There's the official reason that America is giving. Hamas is helping to prop up these protests. They are radicalizing people to go and protest unarmed. That's not why it's happening. That's not why it's happening. Because I always tell you folks, and again, if you're coming to this late, I apologize. I'm not doing cocaine. I have serious allergies. I have to go to an allergist, but I have been sneezing for the last few weeks, and it's gotten so bad my eyes are itching. So, why is this happening? Follow the money, Lebowski. Follow the money. Sheldon Adelson. Sheldon Adelson. Trump, who has previously complained. Oh, here we go. Indeed, today's unpopular announcement, and this is an article from a few weeks ago, indeed, today's unpopular announcement may have been exactly what two of Trump's biggest donors, Sheldon Adelson and Bernard Marcus, and what one of the biggest inaugural supporters, Paul Singer, paid for when they threw their financial weight behind Trump. And for this, they're talking about Trump pulling out of the Iran deal. Marcus and Adelson, who are also board members of the Likud Republican Jewish Coalition, have already received substantial returns on their investment. Total alignment by the U.S. behind Israel, next week's move to the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, and the official dropping of occupied territories to describe the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Adelson, for his part, was Trump and the GOP's biggest campaign supporter. He and his wife Miriam contributed $35 million in outside spending to elect Trump, $20 million to the Congressional Leadership Fund, a super PAC exclusively dedicated to securing a GOP majority in the House of Representatives, and $35 million to the Senate Leadership Fund in the 2016 election. That has now been updated. Trump fan Sheldon Adelson places $30 million bet on the midterms. Republicans have a not-so-secret weapon to counteract all those small dollar donor Democrats, a few very rich friends. Politico reported Thursday that casino mogul Sheldon Adelson recently gave $30 million to the Congressional Leadership Fund, the Paul Ryan-aligned super PAC that plans to spend big defending House Republicans this fall. So, Mr. Trump, who during the campaign I told all his supporters, all this talk about, oh, Jeb Bush's a puppet, Hillary Clinton's a puppet. I mean, they are. He was right about it. But you wait till Trump needs their money. You wait till Trump starts kissing the ring of Sheldon Adelson and Paul Singer and Charles and David Koch. And that's what he's doing, folks. Why do you think it is that Trump found it so important to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? I could give you 25 million reasons why, and now 30 million reasons why, for the House to stay in Republican control. Why do you think it is he pulled out of the Iran deal? You want to be a fly in the wall in his meetings with Sheldon Adelson? Why do you think it is that his administration is now not calling them, settlements? Follow the money. So basically, it's not Hamas that is causing this. It is Donald Trump, his bought-off administration, and Sheldon Adelson. That's what's really going on here. Because Trump was a fake populist. And as I always say, I don't cover Donald Trump that much. I don't feel I have much to add that the corporate media that covers him 24/7 already does all day. And I have a story about that later. Wait till you hear this story about the corporate media and Trump. But he is a dangerous man. He is not a populist. If there is even one person watching right now that voted for Donald Trump, you need to know this is not a populist. This is a drifter. Donald Trump is a drifter. He's a huckster. He will say one thing on for breakfast and say another thing for lunch and say another thing for an afternoon snack, and before you know it, dinner, it's a whole different language. Because Donald Trump is about winning now in the short term and making the deal now. And Sheldon Adelson pulled up a cash brick truck, and Donald Trump is taking it. But whether you believe in Israel's right to exist, which I actually do, some of you might not like that, but I do believe in Israel's right to exist. But I do not believe that Israel is always right. I do not believe Israeli soldiers have a right to basically bazooka gun style murder 55. Again, that was when I started. I don't know what the number's at now. 55 Palestinians have died. Almost 3,000 are wounded. 8 children were killed. And you have language like this. Listen to what Israel's defense minister said. I couldn't believe this. I could not believe this. Headline: Nazis who died in World War II. That's what he's comparing the protesters on Gaza right now. Israeli Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan appeared to liken Palestinians killed in ongoing border protests to Nazi casualties in World War II when he tweeted about the death toll in Gaza. Erdan said the number of Palestinians killed at Monday's protests doesn't indicate anything, just as the number of Nazis who died in the World War doesn't make Nazism something you could explain or understand. The 6th week of the Great Return March protests has been the most deadly, with 52 fatalities, it's now 55, reported so far on Monday. Erdogan placed the blame for the death solely on Hamas, which is in power in Gaza. All responsibility for the bloodshed lies with the leaders of Hamas, who, with Nazi anger, endlessly shed blood to erase from people's memories their own failures in the management of the Gaza Strip. Here it is, the truth. Erdogan said that Israel does not wish to escalate and doesn't want the death of residents in the Gaza Strip. He said that the people who do want this are solely the leadership of the Hamas terrorist organization, which uses a cynical and malicious use of bloodshed. First of all, the fact that this man is a public official in Israel is a disgrace, because he obviously doesn't know history. He obviously doesn't know Jewish history, and he doesn't know what the Holocaust was. Whether Hamas itself is encouraging protesters to go protest or not, like I said, I don't think the majority of protesters need Hamas to encourage them to go protest when the embassy is moved to Jerusalem. I think they're doing it largely on their own. They feel they are being occupied, and they are protesting largely on their own. But last time I checked, a certain portion of Palestinians throwing rocks at soldiers is not the same thing as Nazis herding up the Jews, taking them on trains to gas chambers. That is not the same thing. Palestinians throwing rocks are not the same thing as Nazis literally tossing skeletons underground and people underground that they've gassed to death. What the hell is wrong with him? And this is the right-wing ideology of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who I'll give Obama credit on one thing. He had it right with Netanyahu, because Netanyahu is a zealot. He is the John Bolton of Israel. This is massacre. This is murder, straight up. This is not Israel defending itself. There are ways to defend yourself if protesters are trying to breach your security wall. There are ways of defending if rocks are being thrown at you that do not include murder. But you have CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post and MSNBC. They have, neocons on who say, well, Hamas is behind this. And Jake Tapper literally led his show for like 4 minutes saying this and then moved on. Just move on. 55 killed in Gaza, 2,700 wounded. Off to, somebody in the Trump administration made a bad, vile joke about John McCain. And we need to talk about Melania Trump has a kidney infection that she had surgery on. I think Melania Trump having kidney surgery is a news story. But do I think Melania Trump having kidney surgery versus 55 people being murdered in Gaza, 2,700 wounded, eight of the murdered children, is the lead story that should be on? I've watched CNN. I haven't seen one Palestinian on today. We'll see if MSNBC. I haven't watched MSNBC today, but I doubt they're going to have that many Palestinians on. I can promise you that. And if you're coming to this late, I say this, all of this, at great risk to myself personally. Not risk of anything bad happening to me, but as I said, I grew up in a very Jewish family. My father might as well have a bromance with Bibi Netanyahu. He is a major Zionist. I love my father. I defend him, even though I don't agree with him on this. He was raised very differently. He went to a Zionist camp as a kid. His heart is in the right place. I just think he's very misinformed. My older brother, who I love dearly, was in the IDF. He volunteered. He is a little bit more reasonable on these things. He does not agree with the settlements. And he does think, in certain retrospects, Israeli soldiers are using too much force. But I don't agree with him on everything. And I promise you, when my father sees this video, I'm going to get a call and I'm going to get chewed out. He might not even invite me to, the picnic this summer. But I got to say what's right. I got to do what's right. So this is what's going on. I hope that I do not have to come back tomorrow to report that there are additional murders. Well, I just refreshed the page, and unfortunately there are. Now it's 58 Palestinians killed in Gaza. Over 2,700 wounded. When I started, the official count was 55. And of course, this is always an ongoing fluid situation. Could be more than 58. Could be more than 2,700. We don't know. But this, what we do know, this is normalized because we have a corporate media that is state-sponsored. Our corporate media is state-sponsored to defend the United States, imperialist government, and Israel's government. And that's the truth. And I don't want to let the Democrats off the hook either. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Headline: Schumer applauds Trump on moving U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Schumer takes a lot of money from some wealthy Jewish donors as well. In a rare moment of agreement with President Trump, Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer on Monday praised the president for moving the U.S. embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. In a long overdue move, we have moved our embassy to Jerusalem. Every nation should have the right to choose its capital. Schumer said in a statement. I sponsored legislation to do this 2 decades ago, and I applaud President Trump for doing it. The statement echoed a sentiment Trump expressed in a video message presented at the embassy opening, in which the president said the move has been a long time coming. Nowhere did Chuck Schumer even comment on the murders. The murders going on. It's disgusting. You're a Democrat, Chuck Schumer? Party of the people? Democrats, a long, long time ago, were anti-war. Democrats were anti-Vietnam, in large part, towards the end. And you don't say a word? You don't say a word about 58 people being killed. Just keep taking that money, Chuck. Keep taking that money. Because if you, Chuck Schumer, is Jewish, I'm not a Bible expert. I'm certainly not a religious expert. I'm not religious myself. But I do know this. Judaism does not endorse murdering unarmed and innocent people. So what you're doing to keep your donors happy is a disgrace. And I will, I'll keep looking as I go live here. And if the death count has gone up, I will report it to you as quickly as humanly possible. I think that overall, I hate to say it, I wouldn't be reporting in America if I didn't think my journalism in America can make a difference. But I don't know. I just don't know. Sometimes it's hard to put in words. I don't know if even in my lifetime we'll see progress. I just don't know in Israel on the Palestinian issue. So moving on, as hard as it is, because it's very hard to move on from this, which is murder, to that, I want to move on. There was pretty big news today in the lawsuit that he's now an independent, Tim Canova, filed against the Broward County Board of Elections, specifically the supervisor. If you don't know the story, basically Tim Canova obviously faced Debbie Wasserman Schultz in 2016. He lost on paper by 12 percentage points, but the supervisor of elections in Broward County, which is the area where that district is that Canova was primarying Debbie Wasserman Schultz in, destroyed all of the paper ballots, which is against the law. It's literally against the law to do that. But, the law doesn't matter if it's Democratic corruption helping the establishment, right? So Tim Canova has been saying before he switched to an independent, and now that he's independent, we don't know the true results in 2016. We don't know if he actually won. We don't know if he lost, but by much less than 12 percentage points. There was no way to cross-reference and cross-check the results. So today, let me get it for you. Judges ruling that ballots were illegally destroyed continues. Broward election woes. Florida Secretary of State plans to send an election expert to the state's second largest county during the upcoming elections to ensure that all laws are followed after a judge ruled that the Broward Supervisor of Elections illegally destroyed ballots cast in 2016's congressional race. Broward Circuit Judge Rag Singhal issued an order Friday determining that Supervisor Brenda Snipes' office improperly discarded thousands of ballots cast 2 years ago in the Democratic primary race between Tim Canova and Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, or as my friend Jimmy Dore says, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. That's a bad imitation, I tried. In a ruling first reported by Politico, Singhal sided with Canova. Singhal sided with Canova, who filed a lawsuit last year after he said Snipes, who is the board of the supervisor of elections, ignored and then illegally obstructed his request to copy and inspect ballots. Snipes contends that her office kept scanned electronic copies of the ballots and did nothing wrong. She plans to challenge the order, but heading into the midterm election, Singhal's determination that Snipes broke state and federal law is sure to spark controversy around an office that oversees voting in Florida's most reliable Democratic county. Quote, given all the scrutiny going on about election processes these days and election concerns, one has to wonder on the eve of having to produce these records, they were destroyed, Frank Rayner, an attorney for Canova, said. So, I spoke with Tim Canova about an hour ago to ask him, what does this mean? What does it mean that a judge has ruled in his favor? His voice was kind of low, so my business partner, Jen, did us the favor of adding captions so you could hear it, let me play my interview with Tim Canova to find out what exactly does this mean. So tell me, what does this summary judgment mean?
Well, it means perhaps the beginning of the end of this ballot destruction case. There's still a ways to go, but it means the court has ruled in our favor. Feels like a big vindication of our efforts to try to first inspect the ballots and then bigger stonewalls, the vindication of our lawsuit. Unfortunately, in winning the lawsuit, we're winning it because the supervisor of elections destroyed all of the original paper ballots in violation of federal and state law, and that will effectively make it impossible for us to verify the election through the normal inspection process.
So, winning, does it mean she might be facing criminal charges? There's broader supervision over the upcoming, well, you're not in the primary, but general election?
Yeah, well, it's uncertain what the consequences will be. We can expect that there will be attorney's fees granted to my attorneys who worked very hard for the course of a year and a half now. And what's interesting in the court's decision in the judge's order, the judge suggests that the supervisor showed bad faith in continuing to litigate this case for 8 months after admitting that she had destroyed the paper ballots. And over those 8 months, has increased the cost of litigation on both sides and ultimately increased the cost on the taxpayers of Broward County. I think what will come out of this, from what I can gather, is that the governor's office and the Secretary of State of Florida will be more closely monitoring the Broward Supervisor of Elections and also asking for explanations as to her illegal conduct. I think that there's going to be a push, and I hope there is, to replace her. The prospect of facing an election in the future against Wasserman Schultz, where the state supervisor is counting the votes, is quite unsettling. There's precedent for a removal of a supervisor for this kind of wrongdoing, and the judge even alluded to it in his decision in a citation of a case in which someone was dismissed for failing to preserve evidence. And then beyond that, I think from investigations warranted, yes, absolutely.
So 2 things I just want to confirm. Number 1, this is Brenda Snipes. She was the supervisor of the Board of Elections there, and she, for all intents and purposes, it was public that she was a supporter of Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
I think so. They appeared in public a number of times together. Her underling actually carried out her order to destroy the ballots, had not one but 2 framed photographs of himself with one particular politician on his office shelves, and that was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and he admitted to that in a deposition. The political article that came out today also mentioned that Snipes' lawyer in court, reflected in the transcript, offered to produce to the judge an affidavit from Wasserman Schultz to try to shut down litigation. So there certainly seems to be contact and possibly even coordination between Wasserman Schultz and the supervisor's office.
And Wasserman Schultz has denied she knows anything or her campaign had anything to do with the destruction of the ballots.
Doesn't surprise me that she can deny it. Others can assess what her denials were. This is someone who has a record of deceit when it comes to elections, as we saw play out in the 2016 presidential primaries, and how she failed to uphold her promises of neutrality as chair of the DNC.
Right. And, obviously you're not the judge or anything, but if it's illegal to destroy paper ballots, why isn't it a given that there will be a criminal investigation? Why is it just she'll be supervised? There will be more oversight.
It's a great question. I personally called the Federal Bureau of Investigation society, or if you're wealthy, powerful, and politically connected, you can just get away with anything.
Right. Yeah, because I know if, one of your campaign volunteers were destroying anything, he or she would probably at this point be either in jail or facing prison time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep pressing it, for criminal investigations and prosecutions.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
So there you have it. That was Tim Canova. I don't know if you could hear it. I know that there was an echo, but we'll try to edit it later on so you can hear the whole thing again. We'll put it up on the channel. I think he was talking to me like he had me on speakerphone, and that might have been why it was so bad. So next time I'll ask him to get off speakerphone. My apologies, but these allergies are out of control. Woo! So stuffed up. So, is it like, does anyone else wonder if Debbie Wasserman Schultz has like 15 political lives? I mean, there's Hillary Clinton, who could never go to jail for anything, who could never be guilty of anything. It's always, the law doesn't apply to the Clintons. They could have private servers. They could funnel money in from the Clinton Foundation to the campaign and vice versa. But Debbie Wasserman Schultz isn't that far behind Hillary Clinton in the get out of jail free card. Well, it's not really free because they get out of jail and they don't actually have any penalties on anything they do because they're corrupt and they take money from special interests and then everybody takes care of them. That's how it works. So you're going to tell me Debbie Wasserman Schultz faced Tim Canova in 2016 and that the supervisor of elections in Broward County literally destroyed the paper ballots just on her own. The same supervisor of Board of Elections who has been at events with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who it's known is a supporter of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, just on her own decided, let's just get rid of the paper ballots here. Which, she's a supervisor of elections, so she kind of knows that's illegal. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz had nothing to do with that? What if the truth is Debbie Wasserman Schultz only won by like 4 or 5 points? Maybe she wouldn't want that to get out, since she's had a pretty easy cakewalk for the last decade in South Florida. Maybe she wouldn't want progressives to get energized. Wow, we almost beat Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Let's go at it again. Maybe she only won by 1 or 2 points. Then she really wouldn't want that information out there because maybe Canova would try and get a recount. Maybe she lost. Then she definitely would want those ballots destroyed. But I find it very interesting that the board, the supervisor of elections, literally breaks the law. And I asked him, and Canova says, that's a good question. There's laws on the books. It's illegal to destroy paper ballots, yet she was allowed to. She's not facing criminal charges yet. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz gets to say, I didn't know anything about it. I had nothing to do with it. Just like she didn't know the Democratic National Committee was basically planting hit pieces on Bernie Sanders during the primary. Just like she didn't know they were trying to come up with fairy tales about how he's like, what was that whole thing? That he's like an atheist before the primaries? Or, she just had bad information when she went on television and said chairs were thrown by Bernie supporters at the Nevada State Convention. I mean, it's literally unbelievable, the lies. If Tim Canova's campaign, if any progressive campaign, even breathed near paper ballots the wrong way, they would be in jail. But when the supervisor of elections, an ally of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, does it, destroys ballots, what can we do? There'll be tighter supervision this time around. Well, why don't we get Well, I certainly will, but why are there freedom of information requests to see if there were any communication with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and this supervisor of elections? I'd like to see. I'd like to see that, and I will see that. I will put in a freedom of information request. Were there any backroom deals that weren't on the books, that there are no emails for, between Debbie Wasserman Schultz's campaign and this supervisor of elections? That this was one of the main reasons that Tim Canova decided to run as an independent, because he didn't feel in the Democratic primary comfortable that it would be a free and fair election, because the supervisor of elections, a Democrat who supports Debbie Wasserman Schultz, could possibly do this again. At least in the general, you have Republicans looking over it too. Not that Republicans aren't corrupt, but they have no reason to spike up votes to keep Debbie Wasserman Schultz in office. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It's like that cold or bad allergy or sexually transmitted disease that will not go away. Too much? Too much? Let me know if I've gone over the line, folks. I mean, if you look at my eyes, they're completely bloodshot. If you look at my face, I'm dying of allergies. But it's almost like I have an allergy to corruption, too. Because just the mere mention of Debbie Wasserman Schultz is making me more congested and making me more sick. Maybe you can help me. Patreon.com/Jordan Sheridan Reports. Had to throw it in there. But let me tell you something. Debbie Wasserman Schultz didn't know that the Board of Elections, the supervisor, was tossing out the ballots. Just like when I was in Standing Rock, I thought I was in Tahiti. Please. So we'll follow it. Hopefully I get, when I get back on the road this summer, I could go down and cover Canova's campaign as an independent. So, which brings me to, if you were living under a rock last week, I was back on the road. I was in Virginia. We zigzagged down to West Virginia, and then we zigzagged back up to Virginia. And Jen, my business partner who's in the chat, she was with me. It was her first trip on the road for this kind of reporting. We covered tree protests. We interviewed a mother and a daughter who had climbed up in their trees on their property for over a month to try and stop the trees from getting cut down, because the oil company has seized their land via eminent domain and basically was trying to cut down their trees so they could ram the pipeline through the Terry's property, which has been in the family since the 1600s from a land grant from the Queen of England. A land grant from the Queen of England. So I went down there, I interviewed them, I covered a press conference they were doing. Then we went down to West Virginia on the night of the primary there, where Joe Manchin, that corrupt motherfucker, Senator Joe Manchin, did win re-election. However, progressive challenger Paula Jean Swearengin got 48,000 votes, over 30% of the vote, which might not sound like anything, but if you're a no-name 1 year ago and you get 48,000 votes, Manchin got 111,000, she got 48,000, that's not nothing. And those 48,000 votes were from her going door to door all over the state, north to south, east to west. She was outspent over $4 million to, I believe, like 200,000. So there is progress being made. But if you missed it, let me just give you a taste of some of what I did out there. Here we go.
Polluting the water, since when is profit more important than water? When is profit more important than people? And I don't understand that. And I told someone, I said, the Terrys, we have right much property up here. No, and we've been the land stewards for this property, and we've tried to keep it under, not developed, mainly wildlife. Our bear population has quadrupled. Our deer, our raccoons, our skunks, our fox. I mean, we have the huge owls. You can hear them at night. The whippoorwills down there, which are endangered. They're down there nesting on the ground. And they just dropped trees where they're going to bulldoze all that shit. Why is profit more important than the planet? Why is the people in West Virginia and Pennsylvania that have been complaining to their governors and to anyone that'll listen that they can't drink their water? They can no longer drink their water. The gas company has to bring water in for them to drink, and to do that they have to sign gag orders so they can have drinking water. And it's the play-by-play book for the gas companies and the oil companies. You work the people, you wear them down because they've got the money. You wear them down, you go through their resources fighting you, and then you destroy everything they own. And then they're just grateful to have you bring them clean water because you've poisoned everything around them. You've poisoned their livestock, you've poisoned their pets, you've given their kids cancer. You've got people walking around with boils all over their face. People who worked for the pipeline have radiation poisoning from dealing with the wastewater. You're dumping the wastewater on the roads to melt snow. The scientists have said, the half-life of some of these chemicals they're dumping out is 1,000 years. So why are our fucking politicians letting this happen? Why are they able to poison people because someone's contributing to their campaign so they can be the big guy in the White House? Fuck them all. They're supposed to care about the people. They're not supposed to be destroying the people. And this damn plant they're putting over in the poor black neighborhood where they're going to put the compression station. Who the hell's going to fight that? They're already poor, but they're going to walk over the poor. And I have a relative who lives right up the road from me. He planned on making that his retirement home, and they were going to run the pipeline through his land. And they said, "Oh, don't you worry, we're going to give you about 30 grand. And he looked at him and said, "I pay that quarterly." And he said, "Last year alone I made $1.6 million, and I will keep you in court till hell freezes over." And guess what? They missed his bucking land. They rearranged everything just to miss his land. Because they don't want anyone that can fight back. They're a big fucking bully, and they don't want to meet another bully. Well, they pissed off a redhead. And we don't forget and we don't forgive. They have flattened. MVP never leaves their cars. They always leave a guard. But when my sister-in-law drove up, when they were surveying, she had to park and follow the surveyors. When she came back and drove home, something was wrong with her car. She pulled in and there was a screw in her tire. Because we always get screws in our tires on the road. And a couple days later, when she came up, drove home, a nail in her tire. Because we have nails all over our road up here. That's how we keep them, screws and nails. But they won't leave their vehicles unguarded because God knows they wouldn't have tires on theirs. But, yeah, they keep guards everywhere. And when we...
Damn, Red. Tell them how you really feel. Tell them how you really feel. I mean, Red and her daughter, first of all, you gotta see it. And Jen was with me. These women, Red is 61, her daughter is 30, were literally protested at the top of trees for over a month. Started out freezing temperatures, ended pretty hot. Imagine how stiff your body is. Imagine how out of sorts all your systems are being up there. Then they get out, and literally within, I think, a day, 2 days, they go on a statewide tour to colleges. They went to that church they talked about, to the Capitol. I mean, this woman is a tour. Both of them are forces of nature, literally nature. But the thing that stood out to me, it's like the playground. You know, how do you push back on a bully? You punch him in the fucking nose. Now, I'm not endorsing punching people physically, but I am endorsing punching big oil figuratively. Because it's gotten to a point in America, the legalized bribery that we live under, the legalized bribery system that we live under, is forcing people to literally have to sit up in a tree on their own property that's apparently not their property anymore, because eminent domain has been bastardized. Eminent domain used to be used. So the federal government could like build a highway or build some schools, you know, build things that helped all of us and the public. Now it's being used so oil companies could literally ram natural gas pipelines that could potentially explode right under their property for gas that we don't even need. I spoke with person after person after person in Virginia. They don't need this gas. The existing pipelines now are only at 50% capacity. They don't need these pipelines. But you know why they're doing these pipelines? Because we have a corrupt system in this country where the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, which is literally the regulatory agency that approves or disapproves pipelines, they literally have not rejected a pipeline since the 1980s. That's when I was born, folks. And share this video. Let's get it out to more people. They have not rejected a pipeline since the 80s. And do you know that the oil industry funds the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission? Yeah. So for the Dakota Access Pipeline, it was the oil companies that hired their own independent consultants to evaluate the environmental risks. So the oil company is paying for the testing that FERC requires or the Army Corps requires. FERC is literally, its funding comes from big oil. That would be like Hillary Clinton's campaign issuing a poll on what people think of Bernie Sanders. If Hillary Clinton's campaign was paying for the poll and operating the poll, you think you're going to get true answers back from a poll on the progressive movement or support for Bernie Sanders if it's Hillary Clinton's campaign doing it? It's unreal. It's unreal. And one thing I want you to see there, if you followed my reporting closely, Jen could tell you, God bless Jen. She is going to be the president of Status Quo, the media company we're trying to launch. There we go. If you missed it, that's the name of our media network. I have no idea when we're launching. We're still working on getting funding. But Jen was literally serving as my camera person. We were literally, you should have seen me try to set up that interview with Red and her daughter Minor. I was literally like pulling like waste buckets and stuff like that to prop up a mini tripod to use my phone. Our microphone barely reaches. The interviews we did in West Virginia the night of the primary, unfortunately the bar that Paula Jean Swearingen was having her victory party was very dark. So we don't have a camera person. We don't have funding for lighting and the equipment we need. So some of those videos, unfortunately, kind of look like a ghost story. Just keeping it real. Kind of look like a ghost story. So we're still looking for funding. You know how to help. Patreon.com/Jordan Sheridan Reports. There also were many, many people who contributed just specifically to this reporting trip via PayPal, which was amazing. It's amazing to see viewers. Like, when some outlets say, we can't do it without you, it's kind of bullshit. They can. We literally could not go on this road trip without you. You paid for our hotel. You paid for our gas in the car. You paid for the food in our belly. That's how we did it. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't have had the funds to go. But I hope you go, if you haven't watched them, I hope that a lot of the videos are up. At this point, a dozen videos. We need to create the media we want to see. I'm trying my best. And here is an example of how passionate I am about this. This was me in the forest where they have cut down hundreds and hundreds of beautiful trees, all to put a pipeline through the Appalachian Trail, which is some of the most pristine land we have. If you missed this, here is my, let's call it a rant, shall we?
About this. I mean, look at this destruction. You're not going to see this anywhere. You think CNN's coming up here? Please. Yeah, if you could prove Putin cut down the trees, they'll be here in a jiffy. This is what we need. We need more attention on, it's not just the destruction of the planet or the country, but it's the destruction of basic humanity. We talk about, we started a revolution against tyranny in Great Britain. Well, what the fuck do you call this? This is tyranny. And I'm not supposed to say that because I'm a journalist, but I just speak the truth. I mean, tyranny is when you're controlled and you don't have freedom. And this is tyranny. And, it's been difficult for me the last few months because, I had surgery and other things. I couldn't get back here and show this. But this stuff is happening all out in the open. It's just that our media is completely bought off. YouTube, the platform I'm on right now, is literally suppressing journalists that are not from CNN or bigger outlets. They are suppressing us so you can't see the truth. Maybe their corporate advertisers wouldn't like this. But this is what's going on. And it's not just environmental. There's a lot of corruption involved with this. There's local Virginia Congressman Goodblatt, I read about, that has a blatant conflict of interest. He's invested in a holding company that's invested in these pipelines. I mean, this is legalized bribery on steroids. And by the way, one of you, I think, said it, or Red said it. These oil companies, if they would get their brains on connected straight, you could make just as much money, if not more money, if they shifted tomorrow to solar and wind without destroying people's property and not to mention the water and the animals and, all that. So all I ask, if you can contribute so we could stay, literally, you should see what we're working with here. Jen is not a camera person, but she's my camera person today. We barely have a working microphone. We barely have anything. We're starting from the ground up here. So if you could contribute to the Patreon, this is what it's for. Patreon.com/Jordan Charity Reports. If you don't want to do monthly, you can make a one-time contribution to my PayPal, paypal.me/Jordan Chariton. But I'm not, I'm not interested in reporting on like Rudy Giuliani and stupidity he says, or Russian trolls and all this bullshit that doesn't matter. This matters right here because I think he said it best. If they could come and do it through the Appalachian Trail, by the way, they're doing it through the Big Bend region in southwest Texas. I covered that pipeline down there. Before you know it, they'll say, too bad that your kids go to daycare there. We need the gas, so to speak. Because and by the way, I've covered this enough. It's not only about the money for these oil companies. It's about unfettered power. These are people that something is lacking. Something is lacking internally, particularly empathy, not to mention a few other things. So bottom line, if you can't contribute financially, share these videos. Don't just share the videos, but get on Twitter, get on Facebook, get on everything you're on. Write a separate post with these videos. The hashtag is Stand With Red. The hashtag is No MVP. There's another.
I played that for two reasons. Number one, to hear the birds chirping. And number two, because somebody complimented me on that I've been working out, saying that I looked buff. I have bad news for you. Whoever complimented me in the comments, I haven't been working out. I just had back surgery. That was a really tight shirt. False advertising. I haven't been working out. If you see me without a shirt, you'd probably run. It's not a pretty picture right now. But thank you for the comment, whoever did it. But really, seriously, I was stunned. And, you know, Jen isn't with me, but she could say it in the chat. We were going up this mountain. And by the way, I just had back surgery. So Jen could also tell you, when I was not on camera, I was icing my back on this trip. I probably shouldn't have even gone out on this trip, but I find this story to be super important and it has to be shown. But literally, some of the most beautiful forest lands you could ever find. Hundreds of trees cut down. It's like a maze to have to walk around these trees and branches and limbs. It's vile, but you see no reporting on this. None. I went to interview an environmental lawyer who's helping the family. It's on the channel. You can watch all these. It's the corruption being used so that these oil companies can put in an unnecessary pipeline is staggering. And Jen just said it best, and I've told you this before. When I was at Standing Rock, people are getting shot at and tear gassed at and grenades thrown. And then you go back to your hotel and they're tweeting, you know, they're reporting on CNN about Donald Trump tweeted something nasty. It was the same thing. Jen would go back to her hotel room and put on CNN, and she would text me, now I know what you're saying about how infuriating it is with the alternative reality being shown. Because we're seeing what's really going on in the country. And you are seeing what's really going on in the country because we're trying to show you. And we have more videos from that trip coming that we did not do live. We went down to Buckingham County. There is a church, a historic church called the Union Hill Baptist Church. There are slaves that are buried in a graveyard next to the church. Slaves, when they were freed, came up to this church. There are worshipers that go to this church today that are descendants of slaves. It is an 85% African-American community that goes to this church. So, of course, let's put the pipeline and the massive, massive compressor station that is going to be emitting methane, particulate matter, carbon dioxide. Let's dump it right in the church's backyard. So we will have that for you as soon as we can. We got to send it to our editor. But let me tell you something, folks. I'm not doing this for my health. Frankly, I'm doing it at the expense of my health. Because if you see my back, I had surgery March 1st. I am not ready to be going climbing mountains. Certainly should not be sitting in a car for as long as I was. Jen could attest to my complaints. I'm not a pleasure right now. But nobody's telling these stories, and you only live once, so that's why I'm doing it. So I hope, I pray, well, I don't pray because I'm not really religious, but I really, really hope. If you're not subscribed to the Patreon, now you see what we're trying to do. I'd like to get back on the road. I'd like to hire other people, other reporters all over the country. Because it's going to take more than me. I can't travel forever and ever and ever. Jen was even saying on the road, like, I don't know how you do this because it's tiring. It's not like you go out and report and then go back to the hotel, drink a margarita, and sleep for 2 days. No, you report and then you drive to the next stop. Or you report, and then you go through the footage and work on producing a video. You report, and then you make calls. But there's a lot of driving from point A to point B, to another rally, to another press conference, to another city. Just driving from Virginia to West Virginia was long. But we're doing it for you, our audience. So, of course, support us if you can, but I wanted to update you on another part of the story because there's still a tree protest going on as we speak. Multiple tree protests going on as we speak. But there's actually a tree protester that has literally been up in the tree for 46 days and is being deprived water and food. But CNN's not going to report it. The New York Times isn't going to report it. Frankly, not all independent media are reporting this story, unfortunately. So, Peterson's suit, because a lawsuit was filed a Virginia state senator filed a lawsuit against the National Forest Service because the National Forest Service is the one denying. The protester's name is Nutty. I don't know if that's her real name, but that's what they call her, Nutty. The Forest Service is denying water donations to her. So water donations have come in. They will not give it to her. Food donations, they will not give it to her. And they are trying to keep activists and water protectors and people who come in to support her that want to camp out near her, that want to be around her so she's not alone. This is what they did with Red and Minor in their tree protests. They're basically trying to isolate her and starve her or thirst her to death so she'll come down. So here we go. Peterson's suit, the state senator who's filing a suit against the National Forest Service, is also aimed at a site on Peters Mountain in Giles County on the West Virginia line. There, a protester identified only as Nutty has been living suspended from a pole or monopod since March 27th, blocking efforts to clear trees. Folks, that is, that's a month and a half she's been up there. On April 7th, the Forest Service closed a gravel access road to the public, but continued to allow Mountain Valley pipeline trucks, of course, to use it, saying it was unsafe for outsiders to be around the construction zone. Plenty safe for the oil company, but not activists. But Peterson said Wednesday that he didn't believe that explanation. His suit argues that the purpose of the closure is to prevent persons to reach Nutty or bring her provisions as she is running short of food. Because the road is on public land, closing it is a violation of the First Amendment, Peterson said. People have a right to be there. This is a political act that's taking place. It's political expression. He filed the suit on behalf of 3 local residents who used the road. Peterson said there is no effort to seek money, only the opening of the road. And he said the suit is not specifically about getting supplies to the protester, although, he added, if we get up in front of a judge, I'm happy to go there. Spokesman for the U.S. Forest Service said the agency would not comment. I mean, this is the National fucking Forest Service, excuse my French, denying water and food to a United States citizen exercising her First Amendment. It's that simple. That is inhumane. And as far as we know, I'm about to read a statement from the protester, but as far as we know, how do we know she's healthy? How do we know she's not at risk of dehydration or, functions in her body not working? 46 days up there. She's been up there in frigid temperature, and she's been up there in sweltering heat. So I don't really know how she issued this statement, but this is a statement from her. It was on the Facebook page of the Appalachians Against Pipelines. And it's very, very powerful. Dear friends, over a month ago, while there was still snow on the ground, and I had no idea I was only just beginning my stay in this monopod, I was wondering about how I could use all the time I had to write in ways other than putting out Facebook updates. I decided to try and write letters. Letters to prisoners caged by the same legal system that sent cops to besiege me. Some after being prosecuted for their own involvement in eco-defense struggles. But by the time I had finished my first letter, the Forest Service had cut off all direct contact between me and my support crew, and I had no way to send it out. Once I'm on the ground again, I want to hold myself accountable to remembering to put time into communicating with people on the inside. Until then, I am writing to the many of you who follow my updates, hoping that you all will. Living up here, I've had a lot of time to realize more concretely the importance of contact and exchange with friends and caring supporters. Being able to exchange messages, shout across the closure about silly and serious things, reach out and receive such encouraging responses via social media, and find out about what's happening elsewhere in the pipeline fight and in the world has been tremendously important, especially as I endure the unbroken police presence. My experience is, of course, vastly different from that of incarcerated people. I am here of my own will, can leave at any time, and not subject to the brutality of prison guards or forced to labor for next to nothing. I am not the primary target of a white supremacist state that sends 1 in 3 black men to prison at some point in their lives. I, like all of us to varying degrees, live under the imminent threat of incarceration if my rebellion against the social order goes too far. But I have no basis from which to speak of the life behind prison walls. But I have no basis from which to speak of the life behind prison walls. What I have heard, however, from prisoner support and solidarity groups directly in contact with those behind bars, is that similarly to what I have found while living here, corresponding with people can help provide a lifeline against the demoralizing and alienating influences of confinement. A letter is, of course, no substitute for destroying the prisons themselves. There is no better example of the repressive nature of the state those of us in the so-called U.S. live under than that this nation incarcerates more of its own people than anywhere else in the world. So many are disappeared from their families and neighborhoods by the cops and systems of criminalization when this capitalist economy renders their survival inconvenient to the smooth functioning of the machinery of profit. It's this same extractive economy that continues to push those with a bit more privilege into jobs as pipeline workers, prison guards, soldiers, and police. This same economy that forces pipelines through. The anti-prison struggle is extremely relevant to all of us fighting pipelines and other fronts of ecological defense. It matters because prisons and pipelines are similar kinds of false solutions that claim to being benefits in the form of economic growth while being constructed through and building upon processes of exploitation and control. Here in so-called Virginia, West Virginia, the corporation claims the pipeline is justified by necessity and jobs. Not so far from here in Appalachia, in Letcher County, Kentucky, companies and lawmakers plan to build a new prison on the site of a former mountaintop removal coal mine using the same justifications. It matters because in this toxic industrial society, prisoners, along with poor communities in general, bear the cost of damaged ecosystems, often in the form of poisoned drinking water. It matters because as long as the state exists, and as long as we dare to try to effectively confront it and aspects of its destruction, such as fossil fuel infrastructure, the threat of incarceration will be used to curtail our actions, and some of us will end up behind bars. So fire to the prisons. And until the walls crumble, let's try and make them a little bit less impenetrable. Start writing. New York City anarchist Black Cross has a guide on their website to writing prisoners. Earth First Prisoner Support Project maintains a list on Earth liberation, prisoners, and some form allied struggles. Black and Pink has a list on their website of LGBTQ prisoners who have reached out. Check out Campaign to Fight Toxic Prisons for more on intersections between environmental and anti-prison struggles. Nutty. And here's a picture in her camp where she's protested, day 46, still here. So this woman, Nutty, is literally climbed up in a monopod pole for a month and a half, and you probably didn't know about it. Did you know about this? Of course not, because protest of a pipeline doesn't get a lot of media play, does it? Not as sexy as, as Rudy Giuliani's diarific mouth turns. But this is American heroism. When normal people nonviolently exercise their First Amendment rights at great risk to themselves, it's not good for your health to go climb up in a tree in the freezing weather and then sweltering heat where you're not getting enough water, you're not getting enough food. It's a risk, and they're taking it to stop a natural gas pipeline. I say natural because it's not natural. Natural gas pipelines emit methane, which has been shown to be even worse than carbon dioxide for greenhouse gases. Pipelines, just when you put them under the ground, the earth moves. Scientists have shown this. The earth moves. They all leak. We don't know the majority of the time when they leak. They contaminate our groundwater. They contaminate our wildlife, our animals. When you're out in this land, Jen and I were out, all you hear is natural beauty. And all you see is natural beauty. Sounds of birds, clean air. What's right now clean water, but is at great risk. That is worth fighting for, whether you're an activist or a journalist. So I will continue to cover these stories, whether they have 62 viewers watching or 64 million. And I do think one day we'll get to 64 million, whether YouTube likes it or not. I will be back tomorrow, hopefully less bloodshot in the eyes, less congested, a little more rested, and back at fighting the oligarchy and the imperialist state. I'm not going to say my thoughts and prayers because I think it's corny, but I will be thinking about what's going on in Gaza. And I, of course, as always, will be thinking about the corruption happening here that is endangering your families, your property that's being stolen, and your lives. Take care.